All right. Today's going to be an overview of cell energy. I'm going to throw a lot of terms at you guys, a lot of concepts, but this is just an intro. We'll spend the next 3 weeks going over what I'm going to be discussing in the next 30 minutes. So if it seems like a lot being thrown at you, it is a lot. You're not out of the ordinary feeling that way. But just keep in mind that this is going to be broken down slowly and progressively over the next several weeks. All right. I know you see on the board, there's a couple people that were not here for the test. I'll address you guys after we're done. But for now, let's go ahead and begin. This is going to be all about introduction to cell energetics. This is what Unit 3 is all about, cell energetics. I think your test is the Wednesday before Halloween, so you got more than 3 weeks. Plenty of time. We're still talking about the cell. Last unit, you learned about how the cell experiences diffusion. You learned about the parts of a cell, what they're responsible for. But all those parts, all those components, a lot of those diffusion processes require energy. Well, this is where it comes from. Okay, let's go and begin. Here's the big rule. All organisms, when I say organisms, I mean everything. Bacteria, fungi, protists, plants, and animals require an energy source and a carbon source. And I'll address what those energy sources and carbon sources are in a little bit. But before I do, I want to be sure you guys have a general understanding of what energy is and how it relates to living things. If you took chemistry, the last unit of chemistry is thermodynamics. It's unit 16. You have to deal with specific heats, and you have to learn about kilojoules, and you have to learn about energonic and exergonic and spontaneous and non-spontaneous reactions. We are going to recite a little bit of that. So the first thing is, as I just said, thermodynamics. It's basically a branch of chemistry and physics that scrutinizes energy and heat and the transfer of those. So thermodynamics has a few laws. You got the first law of thermodynamics, second law of thermodynamics, third law of thermodynamics. We only need to know the first two. First law of thermodynamics, I know you've heard this before, energy cannot be what? Cannot be created nor destroyed. The heck does that mean? It means that energy is cycled. Just like matter is cycled. When you were in freshman bio, honors bio, you learned about the water cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the phosphorus cycle, and the carbon cycle. Those cycles basically mean that carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and water are used up over and over again. I remember in college, a professor told me in this water bottle right here, statistically, one molecule of water, one little H2O, passed through a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Because according to the water cycle, there's not water being delivered to this earth like Uber Eats. There's not being water leaving this earth. It's all here. It just gets recycled. Precipitation, evaporation, condensation. It just goes over and over again. I remember a question that I got asked on a cell biology test was, when Charles Darwin died, his last gasp of air emitted a single carbon dioxide molecule. Carbon dioxide is one carbon atom, two oxygen atoms. That carbon atom is inside you right now, composing your muscles. The question is how to get there. And so what you're basically doing is you're saying, well, when he released that carbon dioxide molecule, it went into the atmosphere. And then an autotroph, like a plant, took in the carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. And then it turned that carbon into glucose. And then a herbivore came and ate that plant, thereby eating the glucose. A carnivore ate the herbivore, so now it's in the carnivore. The carnivore releases the carbon dioxide molecule in a breath, and the process just keeps going until eventually it ended up in a plant that maybe I ate, and now it's part of me. That's what was basically being conveyed there is the first law of the conservation of matter. Well, it's the same idea with this. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It just cycles. And there's many different forms of energy. There's kinetic, mechanical, chemical, solar, thermal, nuclear, I think I said electric. No, I said kinetic. Electrical. So in the second law of thermodynamics, we basically say that when energy is converted from one form to another, energy is lost to the environment as heat, and you can't get that back. And what we will be discussing for the next 3 weeks is the flow of energy, the conversion of energy, the transfer of energy from autotroph to heterotroph to autotroph to heterotroph to heterotroph to heterotroph to autotroph to heterotroph. It just goes back and forth. Now, next is going to be metabolism. Metabolism is basically the conversion of either high energy molecules into low energy molecules or the conversion of low energy molecules into high energy molecules. When you guys have a big, fat, juicy steak for dinner, your body breaks that down into the smallest possible molecules and it gets all the energy out of the food that it can. That's a form of metabolism. Metabolism is breaking down, but it's also building up. So there's 2 types. The first type is anabolism. When you think of anabolism, I want you to think of Hulk Hogan. If you haven't heard or know who Hulk Hogan is, he's a pretty famous wrestler from the 80s and 90s. He's from Tampa, as a matter of fact. He went to Robinson High. And he really hit the scene in the 80s. And what he was really kind of the darker side of wrestling back then, it's obviously all a performance. A lot of it is choreographed, if you think it's real. I'm not denying that people get hurt and all that, but it is choreographed. He took anabolic steroids, as did others. And what that basically means is he was taking injections of testosterone. And it's well known that testosterone gives mostly men, but women too, energy, muscle, more muscle development, more stamina. It's like going from a boy to a man. It's like your teenage years. You go to puberty, your testosterone levels are getting a lot higher. Well, he obviously wanted that to get bigger muscles. He was always talking about my 24-inch pythons, his big old muscles. Well, when you think of anabolism, I want you to think of Hulk Hogan because he took anabolic steroids. And he took anabolic steroids to build himself up. So anabolism is the building up of low energy molecules into high energy molecules. So when you think of anabolism, I want you to think of Hulk Hogan, brother. Okay? That's what he used to say. Mark used to say, "What you gonna do, brother?" I don't know why you call everybody brother. You probably call Hannah brother. Just everybody brother. Brother, brother, brother. Now, if you actually put this on a diagram, which when you take the AP Biology exam, guys, there are a lot of graphs. And it's easy to read them, but you're in this class to learn how to read them. So no sweat. You have an XY axis here. The x-axis is time. The y-axis is energy. As you go left to right on time, time moves forward. As you go up to right on the y-axis, energy goes up. According to anabolism and something else I'm going to get to momentarily, I want you to notice that on the left side of a reaction, you have the reactants, always. The reactants are your starting material. The products are your ending material. And I know that there are some of you in here that have not taken chemistry before. You're sophomores. You typically take chem your sophomore year. Some of you are probably taking chem with AP Bio. That's fine. Your reactants are your starting material in a chemical reaction. The products are what you always make. If you want to make a cake, your reactants are eggs, flour, sugar, milk, all that stuff. The product is cake. This little apex in this energy spike is called your activation energy. It is the necessary energy spike that you need in order to actually achieve a reaction. I'm sure that most of you have actually struck a match before, whether to light a candle or hopefully just light a candle, right? Right. So if you just did this, look, that's not going to strike a match. You're going to go really strong, really hard. That's the amount of energy, kinetic energy in that case, to actually achieve a reaction. You get the match the way it was before, and you get the match the way it was after. And a product of that is that flame. That's part of the chemical reaction. How many of y'all ever seen Back to the Future? What was the catalyst to get them to go back in time? How fast did the car have to go in order to get to go time traveling? Anybody remember from the movie? What was it? 88 miles an hour. When the first movie, that was staple of the 1980s, when he said, when this baby gets up to 88 miles an hour, you're gonna see some serious poo. And that was the catalyst, not 55, not 75, not 87, 88 miles an hour. That's what this little peak right here would mean, like 88 miles an hour. And then you get the products. Now, Zespina, just use your eyes. What has a higher energy level? The reactants or the products? That's it. The products have more energy than the reactants do. Therefore, energy is being absorbed. We call this an endergonic reaction. Endergonic means energy absorbed. Because the prefix E-N or E-N-D, endoskeleton, I'm going to enter the room. It basically means inside. So energy is being absorbed. Then we have the opposite of anabolism, catabolism. It's the exact opposite. Your reactants have more energy than your products do. So in this case, Mark, is energy being lost or gained if your starting material has more energy than your ending material? Yeah, this is called an exergonic reaction. X means gone, whether it be exoskeleton, ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, ex-wife, ex-husband, whatever. It's gone. It's left. It's outside. And then you still have your activation energy, which, just in case you're ever asked, or you see it, the abbreviation for activation energy is E subscript A, as in energy of activation. So in anabolism, you're turning low energy molecules into high energy molecules, and in catabolism, you're turning high energy molecules into low energy molecules. So I'll write that down. Catabolism, high energy to low. And anabolism, if you can't come to that your own conclusion, anabolism is low energy to high. So now I want to go back to the notes that we had earlier about that carbon source and that energy source. I still see a lot of pens moving, so I'll give you a moment to catch up. All right. So if I go back up, notice I highlighted energy source and carbon source. Let's talk about those now. So for the carbon source, well, there's basically two ways in which you can get carbon into your body and into your being, and every form of life is going to be one of these two things. The first one is going to be an autotroph. I'm sure you've heard this term before. If you're writing an autobiography or if your car has an automatic transmission, what does auto stand for? Self. Auto means self. Troph means eating. You're not eating yourself. I know that's a very crude translation. It actually means you're eating your own food. You're making your own food and your body's using it. So an autotroph is an organism that can obtain carbon by fixing it. And by fixing it, it basically means capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But I'm going to put a little asterisk next to this because that definition has been revised over the last 30 years. So a plant is an autotroph. A tree, a bush, a shrub, grass, even some algae, actually all algae. The opposite of an autotroph is a heterotroph. I'm sure you've heard this term before. Hetero means other, and troph means eating. So this means you get your food from somewhere else other than you. And a heterotroph is an organism that obtains carbon by consuming organic compounds. In other words, you're shoving food into your face hole. If you're an animal, if you're a fungus, you're decomposing. Some protists are heterotrophs and some prokaryotes are heterotrophs. If you ever had a staph infection, strep throat, syphilis, hopefully no one's had any of those are all heterotrophic prokaryotes. They're basically feeding off of you. Now, the next one is going to be your energy source. There's two ways in which energy enters the food web or food chain. First is going to be photo. This is capturing energy from light. Now, I'm going to stop right here, and I want to show you guys a discovery that was made about 35 years ago. I'm pretty sure it was either the 70s or the 80s, so between 45 and 35 years ago. This is probably one of the top 5 most important discoveries in the history of scientific discovery. This is going to go right up there with evolution. It's going to go right up there with string theory and the structure of the universe. This is big time. So let me preface it with when you guys, when your parents were in high school, which was likely the 80s and maybe the 90s, when some of them may have got a plant, and their bio teacher in high school held up a biology book, much like yours, and they said, okay, boys and girls, here's the rule. You must have the sun to have life. Period, end of paragraph, let's move on. That was the rule. That's what we all thought. But then that changed. We thought you have to have the sunlight in order to have life, because the sun helps the plants. The plants feed the herbivores. The herbivores feed the carnivores, and round it goes. Well, there's a scientist who's about 78 years old now, and his name is Bob Ballard. He's, hold on one sec. Bob Ballard is a famous shipwreck discoverer. He's basically an underwater archaeologist. He's found shipwrecks from the ancient Greece in the Mediterranean Sea and the Aegean Sea. He's found Viking ships. He's found the first submarine used in the Civil War. He's found, I think it was the Bismarck. Wasn't that the Nazi battleship? I think he found that. But his greatest shipwreck discovery was the Titanic. He discovered the Titanic in the mid-80s, right there, 1985. And whenever you've seen that movie with Leo DiCaprio, I'll never let go, Jack. Those robots they show down there in the bottom of the North Atlantic were originally his robots, because it's too dark, it's too cold, it's too much pressure for humans to get there. Robots do fine. So he's out there just looking for shipwrecks, and boom, found the Titanic. In his own words, the Titanic was his second biggest discovery of his career. The number one, the big mama, went to this. Since you've been in middle school, you've likely heard about these hydrothermal vents. This is a relatively new discovery. These vents are super hot, and they are basically underwater volcanoes, and they're emitting phosphates and sulfates and other organic compounds from the core of the earth itself. Now, that's pretty all well and good. What does that have to do with biology? Not only did he discover these vents, but he found thriving ecosystems all around these vents. He found crustaceans, he found fish, he found bacteria, he found so many different forms of life. In the pitch blackness, this is miles down. Now, if you know anything about marine science, you know that sunlight can only penetrate 200 meters down, and then you're done. So there's definitely no photosynthesis going on down there. There's a different type of energy procurement, and that's called chemosynthesis. And this is the actual conversion of the nutrients that these vents are spewing out into energy. So on the Earth, the basis of our food web on the surface is plants. Down there, it's chemoautotrophs. Now, the reason this is a big deal is this proved, not guess, proved that you do not have to have the sun to have life. And so we had to rip up all the high school, middle school, and college textbooks and start over and say, yeah, you do need the sun for the surface, you don't need it for the bottom of the ocean. And this gives scientists a lot of hope that maybe out there in space, where it's really dark and there's not a lot of heat and light, there might be life out there in the bottom of oceans. Earth is not the only place in the universe with oceans. In fact, there's another place in our own solar system that has oceans. It's Titan. Titan is a moon of Saturn. Saturn is the 5th planet from the sun. It's the one with all the rings. And it's really cold out there. So the oceans are not water, because if it was, that water would be frozen as ice. The oceans are made of ethane and methane, which on Earth are in the gas form. We call it natural gas. But on Titan, it is so cold that they have condensed into a liquid. And so maybe there's something swimming around over there that we don't know of, that can thrive off the energy of the moon in this case, because moons are like little mini planets. We don't know it for sure, but what we do know is that it is possible, because here on Earth, it is possible. The Earth could be the 10th planet from the sun. You would still have this going on. So that's a pretty big discovery. Really big discovery. All by Bob Ballard. All right, so that's why I put an asterisk there where it said you get carbon from the atmosphere. There's more than one place to get energy to start off a food web. It's not just the atmosphere. So photo is capturing light. Chemo is actually capturing organic and inorganic compounds. So guys, with photo, you have these organisms called photoautotropes. A palm tree is a photoautotrope. Grass is a photoautotrope. The cactus that your mom might have in the windowsill of her house is a photoautotrope. But the ones on the bottom of the ocean are called chemoautotropes. And after this discovery, this really helped us understand how life on Earth may have started. It's pretty much agreed upon that this is where life on Earth started. 3.5 billion years ago, near the vents that are still around today. Pretty big deal. Pretty big deal. I think the only discovery that would be bigger than this is if we found life on another planet. And if we do find life on another planet, it's not going to be some big creature with a tail and fangs and tentacles. It's just going to be a microscopic organism. Nothing crazy that they're going to make a movie about, but it's still life. All right, so now let's talk about the two forms of energy production we'll talk about in this unit. The first one being photosynthesis. You all know that photosynthesis is the process of capturing light energy You're going to take that light energy to convert it into carbohydrates. And there's a much simpler word than carbohydrates. 5 letters, 6 letters. What's carbohydrate? Plural. What? Sugars. Mitchell, I can see the wheels turning your head. Sugar. S-U-G-A-R. Sugars? Good. The chemical equation for photosynthesis is 6 molecules of carbon dioxide react with 6 molecules of water to yield 1 molecule of glucose and 6 molecules of oxygen gas as a byproduct. And you need the sun in order to achieve this reaction, or just some very powerful form of light. Some people like to grow plants in their basement, in their attic, where they don't want people watching because it's a big secret. You don't do that, Mark, right? You don't grow some funky plants in your closet? Good answer. Now, guys, just by these two reactants here are low energy molecules. Glucose is high energy. So based on that, what type of metabolism or what type of thermochemical reaction is photosynthesis. Is it endergonic or exergonic? You're going from low energy to high energy. That's endergonic, is correct. Is it catabolism or anabolism? Anabolism, good. You're building up. Very good. I don't have to break that down then. Nice. I love when you guys participate. Now, photosynthesis basically is broken up into two stages. And I'm going to really simplify this, one, for time, and two, because this is an overview. We will get into it hardcore throughout the next 3 weeks. But photosynthesis is in two stages. Stage one is called the light reactions. They used to be called the light-dependent reactions. Hannah, I have a big question for you. I think you're up to it, though. You ready? Okay, take this in. Here we go. What does a light-dependent reaction depend on? Oh my gosh. Yes, you got it. Light-dependent reactions depend on light. Enough said. I cannot make this any more simpler than how I'm going to write it. You ready? Light energy is converted to chemical energy. I can't make it any simpler than that. Now, you have to know a little bit more than chemical energy. One form of chemical energy is ATP. What does ATP stand for? Adenosine triphosphate. Here's the new kid on the block. NADPH. If you know what that means, I will buy you a pizza tomorrow. I'm talking about the good time. I'll get Sally O'Neill's for you. Yeah, I think so. It's a really bad name. You ready? Nictidamine adenine dinucleotide phosphate. That's a mouthful, and you don't have to know that name. Just know NADPH. Here's why I'm going to tell you all, and trust me, you'll appreciate it later. I want you to pretend that the P in NADPH stands for photosynthesis. You will realize this will be very helpful later. So in part one, you turn the light energy into chemical energy. Part two is called the Calvin cycle. And you turn the chemical energy into carbohydrates, which is basically food. The most common will be glucose. I cannot make photosynthesis any more broken down than how I broke it down there. We will not be doing it this easy, probably into, 2 weeks from now. But that's a very, I would even say, oversimplified explanation. Just get across a common idea. In part one, you make the energy. In part two, you use the energy. The whole goal is to make glucose. Oxygen is a byproduct. Plants don't want it, so they get rid of it. We need it, so thankfully they do get rid of it. Okay. Now, what is the yin to the photosynthesis yang? What's the opposite of photosynthesis? Cellular respiration. We're going to go over this one first. We'll begin this at the end of this week. Cellular respiration is using glucose and other organic compounds to produce ATP. The chemical equation for cell respiration is 1 molecule of glucose reacts with 6 molecules of oxygen to yield 6 molecules of CO2, 6 molecules of water, and a whole bunch of ATP, like 38 at a time. So it's nearly the exact opposite of photosynthesis. There's just no sunlight. And cell respiration has 3 to 4 stages. The reason why it's 3 to 4 is some people like to combine stages 2 and 3. They like to make it just one stage. I'll tell you what both of those are. Stage 1 is what we will do on Friday. It is glycolysis. You've heard the affix or the suffix lysis. This means splitting. Any idea what glyco means? Sugar. Very good. This means sugar splitting. This is the initial breakdown of glucose after you've eaten it. This process is shared by all life on Earth, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. It is the oldest form of metabolism, or oldest metabolic process. And it exists before oxygen even existed on Earth. And I'll get more into that on Friday. This process produces 2 forms of energy, guys. One you're very familiar with, ATP. Here's the other one. You ready? NADH. Where do you find NADPH? Plants. You can think of that P as plants too. This is why I told you you're gonna be thankful of thinking of the P in NADPH as either plants or photosynthesis. Because NADH is the electron carrier in cell respiration. The mailman is a mail carrier. Uber Eats is a food carrier. The TAs in the office are note carriers or pass carriers. NADH is an electron carrier. It carries electrons, 2 at a time. NADPH is in photosynthesis. NADH is in cell respiration. It is easy to get those confused. And believe me, a lot of students get them confused. That's why I want you to think of the P in NADPH as photosynthesis, so you can avoid that confusion. Steps 2 and 3 is the prep reaction and the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle is also called the citric acid cycle. Same thing. So I don't want you to say cell respiration has the Krebs cycle and the citric acid cycle. They're the same thing. You can't have both. This is just the continued breakdown of glucose. You produce ATP, you produce NADH, and you produce FADH2. FADH2 is another electron carrier. All right. And last one, I'll try to make this quick because we need to talk about a few things before you dismissed. Electron transport chain. It's often referred to as the ETC. You're only allowed to use those initials if you can remember what they stand for, like ER, ATP, DNA. I'll try to make this very quick. NADH and FADH2 aid in synthesizing a lot of ATP. And if you can really impress me, what is the process of making ATP? I'll even give you a hint. It begins with CH. Anybody remember? Yes. Oh, you're so good. Chemiosmosis. Good job. Good job. Very impressed. The production of ATP is chemiosmosis. All right, and we will stop there. I think I threw enough at you. I do have more, but I'm going to stop there. All right, so tomorrow we'll pick up where we left off, and we'll start to talk about enzymes.